Have some big news coming out of the state capitol this morning. A bill legalizing sports betting and online gambling is now heading for the governor's desk. It passed the state Senate early this morning. The vote was 28-6. Fox 61's Angelo Bavaro is joining us live right outside the Capitol with more details on this bill. Angelo, good morning.
Good morning, Erica. And this bill really is the result of negotiations between the governor and the two tribal nations here in Connecticut. That deal was included in the bill. That deal was reached back in March, you may remember. And the governor's office says this big deal could mean tens of millions of dollars in annual revenue for the state of Connecticut. So now let's talk about what exactly is in this bill, what it entails. So this bill essentially allows the governor to amend the state's compacts with the tribes and allow both of them to offer sports betting, online gambling, and online fantasy sports as well. However, those amendments will need federal approval from the U.S. Department of Interior before anything can start here in Connecticut. And the bill also allowing the Connecticut Lottery Corporation to have online keno, online lottery games, and online sports betting as well. And the corporation is also allowed to operate 15 retail sports betting locations, including ones in Hartford and Bridgeport. Now, in exchange for all of that, the bill does require monthly payments from the tribes and the Connecticut Lottery to the state's general fund, ranging from 13.75% to 20% of gross revenues. And also part of this 10-year deal, both tribes did agree to stop development of an East Windsor casino through the duration of the agreement, which has caused some pushback on that end. Now, some critics of the bill also raising concerns about the impacts of online gaming on gambling addiction. Take a listen.
We need to be proactive and protect those that are vulnerable. For many people who say, I play this for fun, it's not an addicting issue. There are equally the same number of people who would not likely be prone to it, but when exposed to it will become addicted.
And in response to that, State Senator Kathy Austin says there are consumer protections in place. She says there are provisions in the bill to fund for problem gambling programs and also to regulate the games to make them less addictive. Now, of course, the big question at home, when is this all going to start? Well, the hope is to launch this, of course, before the upcoming football season. But again, this deal does need federal approval, so that timeline still a bit murky at this point. Reporting live at the state capitol, I'm Angelo Bavaro, Fox 61 News.